Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday afternoon debrief with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Patrick McPartlin after Hibs are eliminated from the Premier Sports Cup with a 3-1 defeat at Celtic Park, a third defeat in a row for David Gray's side in all competitions. It was sort of deja vu from last week from the game at Easter Road. So much so that we definitely considered just taking last week's video and putting it out again to cover this game because, Patrick, you watched the game. It was same story. I mean, given Celtic 2 goals of a head start, it wasn't advisable last Sunday, and it certainly wasn't advisable this Sunday on their own patch at Celtic Park. Again, just not a great day all round for Hibs. How did you find it?
I think if you were David Gray, you would think the one thing you don't want to do is concede an early goal again. And to do exactly the same thing just 60 seconds later, I think would have been. I mean, I didn't see his reaction, but I can imagine what it would have been like.
Is it progress in a way by holding it off for another 60 odd seconds? I mean, if we're trying to extract positives from the defeat,
nah,
but I'm being kind of flippant here, but it's not, as you were saying, it's not how you want to start against Celtic, is it?
No, and I mean, you do make a good point. There were positives from the game, or at least a couple that I managed to eke out of what was another disappointing afternoon. But I mean, it's just one of those things where you're playing a team like Celtic. Obviously, they're really in sync at the moment, really cohesive as a unit. Really pacey in the final thirds. I mean, you've got people like Nicholas Kuhn, Matt O'Reilly, Rio Hatate who can play balls through the defence and just completely take out 3 or 4 people with one pass. Then you've got to be on your toes. You can't do anything silly. And unfortunately, Hibs did that twice in quick succession. Very similar goals, similar area of the pitch where it started from, and it's just as David Gray said afterwards, it gives you a mountain to climb, and it's hard enough. Again, I think David Gray said this, but it's hard enough going somewhere like Celtic and hoping to maybe sneak a goal, hoping to keep it tight, to sort of hand it on a plate as Hibs did again for the second successive game. I think would have been really, really difficult for him to take because they'll have worked on that in training all week. He's changed up the system at the back. He's gone for a back three or a back five, depending how you want to look at it. He's brought Rocky Bashiri back in, just in a bid to do something different. And I think that maybe shows a little bit of kind of tactical sort of common sense, if you like. I mean, the previous managers have maybe thought, no, this is the way we play. Even if we go away to Rangers or Celtic, we're going to play the same way we would play against Dundee or Ross County at Easter Road, which is, I think, not the best plan of attack or defence when you're playing a team like Celtic or Rangers on their own patch. So I think I think Gray does deserve credit for trying to mix it up a bit, for trying to tweak things a little bit to say this is what went wrong this week, this is how we can sort it this week, and then it's just been blown out of the water 3-4 minutes in again. So I think, like I said, some positives that we can sort of move on to discuss, but again, the sort of, I suppose the headline from the game is the Hibs are architects of their own downfall again. And we said that after the St Mirren game in the opening day of the season. We said it last weekend, and we're saying it again. And it is a concern that it's the same sorts of mistakes being made by the same sorts of players. We know the issues that Hibs have, in terms of personnel, in terms of who was available. They don't have Ellie Yuan, they don't have Junior Hoylett. Kwon obviously ineligible to face his parent club. It is difficult, but at the same time, you want your players to at least be able to do the basics, and when they can't do the basics, that's when I think the alarm bells start to ring, which I think is probably why we've seen the reaction we have. I mean, it has been mixed. I've seen people saying, let's not judge Gray and the team on 3 games, 2 of which were against Celtic, which does seem like a kind of common sense approach, but at the same time, when you're making the same mistakes game after game after game, then that's also not a good sign, no matter who you're playing. It comes back to that. One mistake could be an accident, 2 would be etc. etc. So, I think a lot to work on going into Saturday's game against Dundee. Obviously, a very different type of game, but I I do feel things things could start to turn a bit ugly if Gray and the coaching staff don't manage to kind of stamp out what has been like Hibs' Achilles heel for the first 3 games, or well, not the first 3 games, first 2 league games, and then Sunday's game as well.
Yeah, aye. I mean, full disclosure, I wasn't covering the game yesterday, so I've only seen limited bits of it here and there.
Look
But I
at you.
think what's, I'm not boasting on it, you know what I mean? But like, I think you've sort of touched on it there, and certainly the impression I got, at least from just seeing the goals, it's like it's just basics. It's I think managers will probably say if they take a team to Celtic Park and you're beaten with sheer brilliance by you've got guys like Matt Riley there who are being touted as 25, 30 million pound players, like if these guys are opening you up, tearing you apart. But I think even the first goal, you see, it's just Hatati makes it's a good run, but it's not, it's a very trackable run. The ball, it's not followed. It seems as if there's a wee bit of a breakdown in communication. The run, I think maybe Rocky tries to pass it on, cut back goal. And then the third goal, I think, is the one that is obviously was the biggest mess. And I think, again, from the sort of limited viewing I had of the game, my intention was to watch it back today, just so I'm not cheating. But it seemed to, that third one especially seemed to come at a time where Hibs were trying to get themselves back into the game a wee bit. Obviously scored a good goal, maybe a wee bit more improved after the second half. So I think maybe what I'm saying is, like, it's the timing of these goals as much as the manner of the concession that will be so frustrating for David Gray. Like 2 early goals, then you get yourself back into the game, you're having a good spell, and then the third goal essentially kills the game. So it's not just what's actually happening on the pitch, it's the timing. There's never a good time to concede a goal, but there are worse times than others. And it's just this, as I think you've already alluded to, it's like a consistent shooting themselves in the foot. And we could probably sit here on that question. How do you fix that?
Yeah, I mean, David Gray was asked this in post-match yesterday, and it was basically, we coach out of them and we stop picking players who are making the same mistakes. But I do think it's a good line. Obviously, we'll see just how much of a threat it was, I think, when he sort of names his team for Saturday's game. I mean, obviously, you've got people like Kwon is available, which makes things, maybe makes things different in the middle of the park. I think we're probably I think it's probably going to be a bit too soon for Junior Hoylett, and Ellie Yuan's there posting videos of himself doing extra work in the gym and stuff to get himself back fit. And I'm sure we'll get an update from David Gray at this week's press conference as to who's available and who isn't. But it does feel a little bit. I mean, he's talked about short-term pain for long-term gain, and I think it does feel a little bit at the moment that it's almost just trying to get through these games with what he's got available. And the message does seem to be that when everyone's up to speed, there's greater competition for places, there's more options off the bench, and so maybe it does make sense to kind of reserve full judgment until we've seen this Hibs team sort of at full strength, if you like, because I think you can certainly argue at the moment that it's not at full strength. They're missing they're missing players like Ellie Yuan, like Junior Hoylett, who would be playing where they fit. And the other thing as well is that talk about the midfield. We've talked about it before. We don't need to go into too much detail again. Not great against Celtic on Sunday. Again, a different combination to what faced Celtic at Easter Road. Had its moments. I mean, Josh Campbell probably shading it for me. I mean, it's not really saying much, because when you've got Hibs midfield up against McGregor, Hatate, O'Reilly, they are going to look poor in comparison when they're not on not having their best game, and Celtic's midfield are sort of just kind of strolling through the game as they did. But what I think the concerning thing for me is that that's obviously the midfield that Gray's chosen that he thinks has got the best sort of possible chance of getting a result from the game. And I think he does that for every game they play against you, whether it's a back 3, a back 4, whatever. That's nonsense. That's midfield. Whether it's sorry, whether it's a five-man midfield, whether it's with two holding midfielders. See, the defense is just stuck in my head. But I think the problem is that fans sort of sit there and criticize the selection and they say he should be starting, but I'm not 100% sure what's available. Certainly yesterday, what would have been available would have fared any better, and I think that's a bit of a concern. And I think that maybe points to what recruitment's been like in the past few seasons, and this is maybe a result of that. And then you've got little things like Mariah Welsh getting booked so early on that he becomes almost ineffective because he can't, he's got to watch himself. He doesn't want to get a second yellow card and get sent off, and he's unsurprisingly taken off at the break. So I think it's just little things like that. It's kind of like it's decision making. It's it's sort of choosing sort of what ball to do at what time, and that that maybe sort of like it's an issue in the midfield. It's an issue in the defense. You look at you look at Marvin Ekpiteta yesterday for the third goal. All he has to do is just shell it up the park, shell it out into the stands, pass it to Lewis Miller again. But even so, the pass back isn't great because he's left-footed. Bursik's kind of letting the ball run across his body so that he can then try and clear it when what he should be doing is just trying to get out of there ASAP. So it's one of those things that it's not great for anyone concerned. As you say, it comes at a really inopportune moment. Hibs are just starting to get a bit of a foothold in the game, and you think if they can build on this, then they can make a game of it. But as it happens, they concede an early third, and then it's essentially a training game for Celtic from then on.
Yeah,
and I think that, I think it's one of the problems that we saw this last season with Montgomery's team, that no matter who was playing, losing late goals became like a feature. It became a really, really bad habit, to the extent that if Hibs were 2-1 up in the 5th minute of injury time, you thought, not safe yet. And we saw it time and time again. And my kind of fear is that no matter what this Hibs team does moving forward, no matter who's playing, there's always going to be that risk that there's a mistake, like a fatal mistake, if you like, in the team, no matter who's playing, where someone will be short with a back pass, or somebody will lose possession in a really sort of the inopportune place in the pitch. And that's the sort of thing. I don't know if that's psychological. I don't know whether it's, I wouldn't necessarily say it's tactical. I mean, it's just, as we were saying, it's the basics. I mean, you tell kids when they're 5 or 6 years old, like if they're playing as a defender, get the ball, just get rid of it. It shouldn't be the case that you're sitting here thinking, well, how have they made the same mistake for the third game in a row and it's led to a goal like that?
Yeah.
And understandably, I think there's going to be ire directed at David Gray and his coaching staff, but at the same time, he's not telling them to do this, and he shouldn't have to say, by the way, don't be short with a back pass because it will give the opposition a chance to score a goal. It's just it is the basics, and that's the sort of things that you think that's the stuff that should be the kind of bread and butter. That's the stuff that you shouldn't have to go through on the training ground each week, because it's you kind of take it as read that in that sort of situation they'll make the right decision. So maybe that does come down to psychological factors. Maybe it's something else. Again, Nick Montgomery did talk about getting a sports psychologist in to deal with the sort of losing the late goals. Obviously, they've stopped doing that, but they've sort of replaced it with something else. So, I don't think. I think there were a lot of big players yesterday who didn't have their best games. I think, Martin Boyle, bar really good assist for Kurevich's goal, was really quiet, really sort of on the periphery throughout. You want more from your midfielders. I thought Jordan Abita, normally, pretty reliable, didn't have his best game. So you've got that sort of coming into it as well. A lot of factors all coming together. To, I suppose, just produce a performance which wasn't good enough and which ultimately got Hibs knocked out of the cup. And I think whether it's through you put an arm around certain players or you give certain players a kick up the backside, as Gray was saying in his post-match remarks yesterday. Do you change the personnel? Do you change the formation? I mean, you can't keep on doing the same thing and expecting different results. But when you're changing up and you're still getting the same results, that also is a concern. So I think that'll be sort of like the number one on the coaching staff's list this week is, what team can we pick for, the weekend's game against Dundee that's going to give us the best chance of winning the game, and how can we stop them from making mistakes, and also how can we stop them from losing early goals. So I mean, nothing big. And it does feel a bit daft that we're saying this, but it's. I mean, David Gray did seem at a bit of a loss to explain why it's been such a problem. This, kind of repeated mistakes and just like sort of small parts of games where Hibs actually look okay, but then they just can't keep it going for 90 minutes. And if people read, Matty Fairney's column from last week, he was saying the same thing, saying that the biggest puzzle that remains with this Hibs team is why they can't put in a performance for 90 minutes. So, again, it's a team in transition. How many seasons in a row are we going to say that? It is a team in transition. You would feel there's probably still players to come in, still players to leave. There's obviously players who are here who I think will be more involved going forward. Nicky Cadden obviously making his debut yesterday. I imagine we'll probably see Quan get some game time this weekend. Just I think something like that, just to freshen things up a bit, might make a difference. But I think it's patience is going to run out. It's not just a case of saying, "Oh well, you need to give the management time, you need to give the players time, you need to do this, you need to do that." Like it's the kind of thing that you need to have that sorted, early on in the season. Like you can't just go through the season making a mistake a game and hoping that it won't come back to haunt you, because it will. And obviously the main thing at the moment is Hibs have no league points on the boards. They lost the first 3 games of last season and will desperately want to avoid doing the same. So it's a big week for the players, for David Gray, and Saturday's game becomes really important for a variety of reasons, and possibly coming up against a team that scored 29 goals in 7 games is not who you'd want to be facing, but you never know. Maybe that might actually have a positive effect. Just it's hard to know what to think, but you would hope, I think, that after seeing the performance against Celtic, after seeing the good bits, after seeing the bad bits, then going by what he said in his post-match comments, Gray will have an idea of how to sort it.
Yeah, just coming back round to David Gray's post-match comments. I mean, I completely kind of get what he's saying and agree about the increase in the competition for places and guys getting up to full fitness and coming in to challenge for those places. I suppose the only area I would maybe be a wee bit concerned kind of around that is the fact that Hibs are still looking quite vulnerable at the back, but that's obviously in spite of the fact that a lot of their business at that end of the pitch was actually done quite early in the window. Bursick came in, Ekpateta, O'Hora, and it still looks kind of ropey. So you're kind of wondering, well, that area of the pitch certainly maybe isn't a case of guys still getting up to speed, or there's been competition. Rocky's been in and around it, pushing for a place as well. So again, that to me paints a wee bit of a concern. And obviously the standout line from, as you said earlier, from David Gray's press conference was, that I can't keep picking players who are going to make the same mistakes. So, I mean, it's hard not to get away from the feeling that perhaps that was aimed at the likes of Ekpateta or Bursick and goal. I mean, but that would be quite a statement, I suppose, for a manager so early in the season to drop 2 guys who have just been brought in literally a couple of months ago. But at the same time, it's David Gray's he's caught between that and, we talked about it last week, the team needs to find a spark from somewhere. Something needs to change to get the season going. So, I mean, do you feel if there are changes coming, then it is most likely going to be in the defence, or are you anticipating by the time the Dundee game comes around that it could be all over the park?
I thought you were going to say all over the place there, which would have been a bit more accurate. I think the problem is that when you're a journalist, you read an awful lot into the most simplest of sentences. Mm-hmm. So, you look at what David Gray said, can't keep picking players who are making the same mistakes. Okay, same mistakes points towards, as you say, probably Ekpiteta and Bursic, because they've been the ones I think who've been involved in, the goals where it's been like an iffy back pass and it's not been cleared properly. And I don't know whether that comes down to communication. I don't know whether it comes down to, like we were saying before, decision making. Whether it's, I mean, when I think when you're coming up against Celtic, it's a bit different to coming up against the likes of Elgin City and Queens Park in the League Cup. But it shouldn't be a case of players sort of thinking, I mean, I don't think it's a case of players coming up from from down south in Ekpiteta's case, or having spent a lot of their career in England and then going over to Belgium in Bursic's case and just thinking it's the Scottish League, we can scoosh it. I don't think that's the case. I think it's just for whatever reason sometimes signings don't work out or they take a while to settle in. I mean, looking at Celtic, like Nicholas Kuhn's a really good example. He was brought in last season, and I think there was a little bit of not surprised, but I think people expected a bit more from him, and sort of thinking, well, why have they signed him? And I think so far this season and in pre-season, he's shown why. So we know that players take time to settle. We know that players take time to get up to speed. Ideally, you don't want it to be 3 of your sort of 4 or 5 defenders and goalkeeper that are taking the time to get up to speed. I mean, it's a big risk. I think. Like, I mean, again, it goes back to recruitment when. Hibs sort of limped on for far too long without sorting out centre half sort of personnel, and then you get to a stage where Paul Hanlon moves on, Will Fish goes goes back to his parent club after his loan spell ends, and maybe it would have made more sense to to keep Rocky in there alongside O'Hora to begin with. Maybe it would have made sense to try and play with a back 3. I mean, there's lots of possibilities. Things that could have been done differently. But at the same time, David Gray is someone who sees these players every day in training. He knows what they're capable of, and he's made a decision on who he feels is the best sort of the best combination in certain positions. But I think he showed us last season in a sort of 4th interim spell that he wasn't afraid to make quite significant changes. Like Emiliano Marcondes, he dropped him and brought Josh Campbell back in, and for the sort of last 2 or 3 games of the season, Campbell looked quite bright, quite kind of. I think you could say he was offering a bit more than Emiliano was, but again, different types of player. But that was quite a big call by Gray to say, no, you know what, Josh is going to be here next season. I'm going to play him rather than playing somebody on loan who probably isn't going to be here next season. So we know he's not afraid to make these big decisions and make these big calls. But at the same time, it's a balancing act between how do I get the best out of the team and how do I keep the players on side? Because 2 games into the league season, if you're then saying, right, I'm going to make 7 changes just for argument's sake, and you're changing up your goalkeeper, 2 of your defenders, 2 of your midfielders, can you count? But anyway, if you're making that many changes, then that the players are then thinking, well, what does this mean for my future? They're then maybe thinking, the manager doesn't really know what he's doing. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see, I think, maybe 3-4 changes for Saturday's game. I can see Ekpiteta not starting. I think he'll continue with Bursic. I think we'll probably see Kwon coming in to the midfield, and potentially Nicky Cadden if they feel his sort of fitness is up. Because I do feel when he came on, he did sort of contribute in the early part of the second half to him sort of being a bit more at the races. And again, it could be that it's like fresh faces is the spark that they need. But I think it's a difficult one. It is still quite early on. You're still sort of you want players to bring in. There's players who are going to go out, and it's how do you get the best out of the personnel you've got available. And I think it comes down to, we said this so often last season, that the players on paper should be getting a result and they should be capable of putting in a performance in certain games, and it's just not working. And so whether that's, again, whether it's psychological, whether it's the combination of players, I mean, just the midfield, for an example, you go back to like McGee, McGinn, and Allen. The reason that midfield worked so well is because they all complemented each other. All of them had a different set of skills, and when you put it together, it was exactly what you needed from a three-man midfield. That's why it worked. And since then, I don't think Hibs have really managed to replicate that. And it's not the hardest thing to do. Not necessarily saying you're going to get three players of the same quality. I mean, just pluck the next John McGinn from from another sort of Scottish team below you in the league, or find somebody like Dylan McGee who can kind of control the tempo. But I think that's what they're trying to do with Kwon. I think that's what they're going to hope he's able to do. And with his height and physicality, he'll maybe a bit more protection for the defence. So I think they are taking steps to try and remedy this situation. But I don't think it was just empty words from Gray. I think it was probably intended as a bit of a wake-up call for some players, and probably one of those where you say something like that, and fine well that your players who haven't played or who are on the bench are going to see that and think, oh, there's a chance for me here, and that then maybe gets more out of them in training, and it sort of raises standards, which is what Hibs need to be doing at the moment. So I think it could end up being, I don't want to say a master stroke because that seems a bit strong, but I think it could end up being, I think it could end up having the desired effect in that it'll give some players the kick up the backside that they need. It'll for some other players it'll maybe make them realise, oh, there's an opportunity here if I put in a bit more in training, if I stay behind to work on something, things like that, because during the summer, during the Premier Sports Cup, games, and in pre-season, Gray was making a big thing about knowing the bulk of the players who were there and knowing what they could do and where their strengths and weaknesses were. But when you bring new players in, you're maybe, obviously in the case of people like Kujarevich, like he knows what he can do, he knows his abilities, but he doesn't know how they're going to interact with the current set of players. So it does feel very much like a team in progress, like a work in progress. But you would just hope that it clicks sooner rather than later, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and I suppose just the thought occurred to me, like if David Gray's saying something like, I can't keep picking the same players who are making the same mistakes kind of over and over. It's easy to forget, I suppose, that even though he's only been head coach for a few months, he has been working with this group for a lot longer than that. So you're wondering if, in his mind, for us, it's quite easy to jump to look at the last 2-3 games, but you do wonder if, in his mind, is he looking at that from a longer term perspective as well, and not just talking about specifically the guys who have made errors in the past couple of games, new guys who are still getting to grips with the club, getting to grips with Scottish football as well. So, I suppose time will tell, and we'll see this weekend. But for now, I think, we're going to be a wee bit self-indulgent for the last part of the show, because as you'll see, as you'll see on the ticker below, and as we've been rattling on and on and on and on and on social media, we are running a flash sale on the Hibs Observer that takes in the start of the new season, and it ends tonight. So we're going to give it one final push. Now, I understand a lot of folk who tune into these briefings may already to our website, and for that, obviously, we are very, very appreciative. But if there's anybody who needs a bit of convincing, obviously, you've written, Patrick, about what we offer on the Hibs Observer and why you think that now is probably the best time to sign up, because it's an offer for £12 for 12 months, takes in the entire season. So, again, you've written about
some people off.
What's that, sorry?
That might put some people off.
Well, we try and be eternal optimists on the Hibs Observer. So, if you could join us in that, then if you want to look at it from that positive perspective, you get access for the entire season and beyond. But again, that's up to yourself whether you want to decide whether that's a good thing or not, folks. But as I was saying, Patrick's written about why he feels it's a good time to sign up, and basically, if somebody is looking to sign up to the Hibs Observer just now, like what can we offer them? Why should they offer?
I think it's, as we've said from the start, it is very much about being the kind of number one place for journalism about Hibernian FC, not just kind of match report stuff, not just press conferences, but everything from exclusive interviews to deep dives, tactical analysis, and just those sort of long reads that we like doing about tactically and statistically how bad Hibs have been in the previous game. It'd be nice to change that soon, and I hope we do. But I think it is quite unusual having somewhere that's, I think, just sort of like so dedicated to covering every kind of cough and splutter from the club. Not just like on a match day, but things going alongside it as well. Obviously, with the Premier Sports Cup games and the season starting, has been a bit sort of game orientated in recent weeks. But don't want to give too much away. But we do have a lot more content planned away from the match day side of things. One of the things looking at doing is going down a more kind of historic route. More on that hopefully later. But that's something that we've not really touched upon much. But just sort of adding another string to our bow, if you like, a bit more of a nostalgic look at Hibs history, and not just sort of do you remember this game from like 19 Canteen, but more just speaking to the people who were I suppose sort of like key figures at different times in the club's history, and bringing something different that nobody else is doing. On top of that, plenty more exclusive interviews. And what I would say is that we've obviously got very loyal subscriber base at the moment, and just to echo what Liam was saying, obviously very, very appreciative of everyone who is backing us and has signed up and supporting what we're doing. But a lot more exclusive interviews that I think will really make people think, not just here's a player that we've talked to, but just a little bit different. So I don't want to give too much away because trying to entice people to subscribe. But I feel like we've had our sort of first season, and it's gone fairly well from our point of view. Maybe not so much from Hibs' point of view, but there's certainly been no shortage of things to write about. And I think this season is maybe maybe gives us a chance to kind of push the boat out a little bit, be a bit more inventive, a bit more daring, and just really, really kind of keep pushing the boundaries. And what I would say is, if people have figures they want to hear from or things they'd like to read about, then I think our emails are fairly easy to find on the website, or you can tweet us and let us know, and we'll do our best to try and track people down, or speak to people you want to hear from, because we can sit here, we can have plans, we can say we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that, but there's always a potential that there's a left back from the 1992-93 season that didn't play that many games, but you desperately want to hear from, and I suppose we've got the scope to go and look them up and speak to them about their Hibs career and their football career and everything they've done since. And I don't really see anyone else doing that. So I think that's certainly one selling point. And I think the fact that we've got this dedicated app as well for Android and Apple. I mean, obviously, yes, I'm biased, but I think it's a lot better to read our stuff on the app than it is to read it on the website, or follow the links through Twitter. And that's another perk of subscribing. By far the best way of consuming our content, and you get videos like this as well, and podcasts, which obviously is the true highlight, getting to see our happy faces 3 times a week. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's a good time to be signing up, partly because it is a really good deal. It's essentially working out as a £1 a month, which for access to everything we're doing, exclusive interviews, pre and post match coverage, tactical deep dives from Craig Nisbet, aka 9125 analysis, Matty Fairney's columns on a regular basis as well, giving a sort of alternative view from the stands, if you like. I just think we've got a lot going on, and I don't see anybody else covering the club to the same extent as we are. And I think that it's really just about providing Hibs journalism from a kind of Hibs point of view for Hibs fans. And I know that the last thing I'll say in this, because I'm starting to ramble a wee bit, if you subscribe, I'll stop rambling. But what I would say is that I think that can understand people maybe not wanting to pay for journalism, or feeling a wee bit uneasy about subscribing, because it is, I do get it. The cost of living is rising, and bills are rising, and I think there's a lot of things that people probably need to keep their money aside for. But supporting us is, I suppose, the start of what the media will become. I think it is the future. I think more and more organizations, whether it's football related, whether it's general news, politics, etc., will be turning to subscription models. And I feel that what we're doing is offering a heck of a lot of content for quite a reasonable price. £12 for 12 months. Monthly Spotify or Netflix is about £10, £11, £12. So that gives you an idea of what you're paying. £1 a month for all the Hibs content you could possibly want and didn't know you needed. So I think how's my maths? Not great. You've got until about midnight to sign up, and I would just encourage you to do so, and to support us in what we're doing. And I suppose just kind of jump on the bandwagon, I suppose. I think it's, we did build up a bit of speed last season, and I think it's just about continuing that this season, and just seeing where it takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've captured it perfectly there. I think the only thing I would add is that it's definitely, there's never a dull moment. So especially...
that is true.
Yeah, there's hardly been a dull moment. I mean, Hibs have not been, it's not been a vintage Hibs team that you've been watching over the past year or so, folks. But as we say, there's always been talking points. There's always been stuff to dig into. We're starting to get sort of more and more interaction, just for example, on these YouTube videos as well. So it's coming in, kind of joining in the debate on that as well. And I think, yeah, exactly, yeah, it's a kind of, you can treat it as a sort of group therapy, if you like. But yeah, I think I've not really got much more to add. I think you've captured it very well there, Patrick. Actually, all I would say is, if you're watching us on YouTube and you haven't clicked the subscribe button, now that does come free of charge, and that is a start if you want to help support us to keep growing the YouTube channel. But yeah, you've got until tonight to consider signing up to our Hibs Observer new season sale. We really do hope that you've seen enough from us, folks, to get involved. But I think for now, we're just going to park it there until...
I think people say they've seen enough, full stop.
Quite possibly. So yeah, we'll leave it there, folks. Thanks for joining us to talk about the game today, and for listening to our sort of... what would you call it? Waffle. I just meant to plug this deal. I mean, we're not quite salesmen, I suppose, are we? But we've given it a good go. Yeah. So yeah, we'll catch you later in the week as we build in to this weekend's game. We'll be back with more videos, more coverage, obviously press conference and everything else later in the week as well. So do stay tuned and have a lovely rest of the week. We'll speak to you again very soon. Cheers.
Cheers.